In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty God, we thank you and praise you for the beginning of this day. And as we celebrate here on earth, the festival of all those who you have called to yourself, and whom the church recognizes as being with you in heaven as saints. As St. Paul calls them the holy ones, who've gone before us marked with the sign of faith. May we too strive to follow in their example of being open to your grace and the direction of your Spirit and your way and your will, especially in our prayers and in our decisions and choices in life. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay. So, very good. Don't forget, the important thing you have to do this weekend, turn the clocks back. Turn the clocks back. Throw off your sleeping pattern. I don't know about you, but when we switch like this, I never get an extra hour of sleep. I don't either. I wake up at the same time, And, usually you can't go back to bed because you got bad. You might as well just stay up and take a couple extra cups of coffee and go at it, huh? So, Leviticus, chapter 8 and 10. We're going to look at today. In the book of Leviticus. Now, I'd like to start off by asking, how many of you ever went to an ordination? Of an ordination? Priest or deacon? Okay. It looks like over half our people. So, this morning into the original ordination rite, or consecration, okay? So, but, even though we're going to focus on Leviticus chapter 8 and 10, we're going to start out with Exodus chapters 25 and 31. So, flip open to Exodus 25 and 31. Now, why should we do this? Well, because this is in Exodus, after Moses comes down and he has the commandments of the Decalogue on the tablets and so on. They have to have a special place where to put them, right? And that special place is going to be called the Ark of the Covenant. Not just a box that they throw around. Huh? So this is a prescription on how to handle that comes from God. And it's found, the prescriptions on what to do with it and how to handle it is found in Exodus chapter 25 through 28. And it starts, and I found this interesting. So, chapter 25. This is what the Lord then said to Moses. Tell the Israelites to take up a collection for me, and from every man you shall accept the contributions that his heart prompts him to give me. These are the contributions you will accept from them: gold, silver, bronze, violet, purple, and scarlet yarn, fine linen and goat hair, ram skins dyed red, and tahash skins, acacia wood, oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil, and for the fragrant incense. Onyx stones and other gems are mounted on the ephod and the breastplate. They shall make a sanctuary for me, and I may dwell in their midst, in this dwelling, and all its furnishings you shall make exactly according to the pattern that I will show you. So Moses, as to instruct the people, get the carpenters out, okay? But I like Here's the instance of the first collection ever taken up. Okay, mark it in your notes. The first collection, yes, it is in the Bible. Here it is, Exodus chapter 25, verse 1. So this gives details, and each of these chapters gives details of really that which will be needed. So we get chapter 25. Chapter 25 will have, first of all, the dwelling or sanctuary. And it goes into detail after that, how to construct that. The table, or other utensils to be used. Okay, and other utensils. And then the lampstand. My goodness. Get out the holy oils. And, the lampstand, I talked a little bit about it last week, it's going to be
pure beaten gold.
7. Right?
Well, you did a lot of describing the menorah, aren't you?
Yeah, and it's in this chapter. Okay? Okay. So, chapter 26 then. Chapter 26. Chapter 27. We're not going to go into detail, but I just want to point out there's a progression here. So, all right, so it describes the dwelling, the table, and the lampstand. Next, the tent. And the
walls.
veils and walls. Now this will be later on, and I want you to look for it, the tent of meeting. Tent of meeting. Right. Chapter 27. The actual altar. All right. Courtyard around the altar.
Father, what's a cubit?
What's a cubit?
Yeah, how big is the
The dimension of a cubit.
Google it.
This much.
No, I'm asking Father. He's more intelligent than Google.
Thank you very much. It's about that much.
Okay.
And
Oil.
of course, oil. But oil for lamps. And this is called the dwelling tent. The 28th.
Investments.
Then we get to the interesting stuff that we'll go into more detail in the next. But then the priestly vestments. And a lot of detail with this coming up, okay? Priestly vestments,
Breastplates.
the ephod and the breastplate.
They don't even know what the ephod is.
and then other vestments to be worn. So these are outlined right away in Exodus. Okay. And then chapter 29 is the consecration of the priest, or ordination along with sacrifices. That's in Exodus. As we look in Leviticus then, as we look at Leviticus, chapters 8 through 10, it's going to go into more detail. And just in general, almost like an introduction, the installation of Aaron and his sons and their descendants, they will be the priests for the community. The first sacrifices and what is used for them, and the sacrificial rules, rituals, and rubrics. So rules, rituals, and rubrics, okay, on how to do things. And all three are reinforced messages. The sacrifices, they must be taken deadly serious by these priests, those who are set apart. Close attention to detail. Ritual, and why? Why? Why, Father? Why, Father? Joy, we're looking for you. Why, Father? Okay.
We were asking that back here.
Yeah, I figured, yeah, speak up there, Joe.
So it's uniform.
So it's uniform? Well, but there's different, there's some aspects of the rituals that are the same, but what is happened to some are burned, some are not burned. Some are burned out, inside the enclosure, some are burned outside the camp. Some aspects of the sacrificial offerings, the priest can keep a portion of it for themselves, but there's certain organs and so on that has to be. So it's not all exactly the same, okay, is what I'm getting to. And, exactly how to order that and put it in order. And the reason why, ritual improperly done will not bring the glory of the Lord God into their midst. Ritual improperly done will not bring the glory of God into their midst. Okay? So, the priests always must be reminded of the distinction between the sacred and the profane, between the sacred and the clean and the profane, the unclean. And so, how is this determined? Well, it's determined on the part of the priest, the rules for proper dress, and the location where they accept these gifts, where they make the offering, where they burn the sacrifices, where they take the ashes after they burn the sacrifices, okay. And drinking alcohol, not. There's a prescription for the priest not to be drinking alcohol. Okay. I don't know if you people realize this, but 40, 50 years ago, every newly ordained priest had to take the pledge. You know what the pledge was?
No booze.
No booze for 5 years. For 5 years of the priesthood. No booze for the first 5 years. Yeah, most people don't really realize that, but you know, the old-time priest said was.
That went by in a hurry though.
Huh?
That went by in a hurry though.
Yeah, about the year that I was ordained.
My mother told me years ago that nothing good came out of a liquor bottle.
Nothing. Really?
And then my husband used to say, well, that might be true, Eileen, but I'm still checking.
I still have to check, okay. Nothing good came out of the liquor bottle. Okay, that's, yeah.
It's interesting that that is a rule, and yet the water was not pure because of the time and the era, and the fact that the vessels had lead, that there were a lot of people that had, were poisoned by water and the vessels they drank from.
Roy, it certainly was true in Rome, but I'll let you know, one of the reasons why the good Lord led Moses in the Exodus, first down in the southern Sinai region, and he encountered Jethro and his daughters and married Zipporah. That region had ancient copper mines. It was the region of ancient copper mines. Archaeologists are still finding the residuals of the copper mines. What was copper used for? Copper was used for a couple of things. Making vessels and so on, okay? And then they would quote them with bronze or gold or silver or so on. The other thing is copper was used to harden metal. This is at like the beginning of the, or middle part of the Iron Age, huh? And you need copper to do that. Down in the Sinai Peninsula, they had copper mines in ancient times, okay? So it was kind of interesting. It's not made as a mentioned in the Bible necessarily, but we understand that now through archaeology and so on. Okay, let's get to this stuff. Okay, 4 main points before we run into this, so that for us to look for as we look at these chapters. Number 1, Moses literally functions like the high priest. And in order to set aside his older brother Aaron and his sons, he literally bathes them and dresses them. Now, you think back to the ordination ceremony that we have today, you know, that the ordinandi gets invested, okay, usually by a priest that's important to them, was a bit significant in their vocation. So that's the first one. Number 2, let's look for this. There's a phrase that's repeated over and over again. And the phrase answers the question, Joe, every time, why? Why? Why does Moses have to do this? And the phrase is, as the Lord commanded. And chapter 8 and chapter 9, as the Lord has commanded, is found 9 times. After just about each section. Okay? Why? Number 2, why? To that point, to emphasize the validity and the licidity, that it's valid and licit for the nature of performing sacred rites, as the Lord has commanded. 3, the themes of liturgical style. The themes of liturgical style. And they are summoning the people. Number 2, assembly of the people. And number 3, bringing forth from the people. You see, the community itself and individuals in the community are to bring forth. The animals or the cereal the priest wouldn't know what kind of offering. Is it a sin offering? Is it a pledge offering? Is it purification offering? Yeah, what kind of sacrifices? As we look at this, for each and every one of those different designations, there's certain, prescriptions, rituals, rubrics that the priest has to follow. They wouldn't know unless the individual who brings the lamb, the goat, the male, the female, goat or lamb or unblemished or so on, for each of those, whatever is offered, signifies a different offering or sacrifice for a different purpose. Okay? And the individual bringing, and the individuals who bring animals, they themselves have to kill the animal. If it's an animal, they themselves have to kill the animal. And they do they pass on by laying hands on the head of the animal first. And then kill it. And then they give the slaughtered animal to the priest to do the rest of the job. Okay, so, and this theme, this liturgical style, summoning, assembling, and bringing forth, that's found 8 times throughout these chapters. The other highlight, and I can't emphasize this enough, the mediatory character of Moses. He facilitates the Lord's will to make valid. In other words, he functions like a high priest. Why? Who else is going to do it? Right? They don't have a pope. They have a Moses. Okay? Yeah. Well, some people say beyond. So, how is he qualified? That's the next one. How is Moses qualified to do this? Well, in Exodus chapter 33, verses 7 through 23, and it's repeated over and over again in the Old Testament. Moses is qualified because it was the Lord who summoned him, and it says here in quotes, verse 11, the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face as a person speaks to a friend. So the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face as a person speaks to a friend. And so that's, that's the understanding why Moses was set apart. It might point out some other things connected with that ministry of high priest by Moses, okay? Now, so, chapter 8, verse 1 through 3, or 1 through 13, it begins basically what we call the ordination rite, okay? And so, at your tables, why don't you read that out? Chapter 8, verse 1 through 13.
Now he spoke to Moses, Aaron, the anointing one, bulls of sacrifice for sin, 2 rams, and a basket of unleavened bread, and all the whole. Moses said, Yahweh ordered Moses to gather Moses said, this is what Yahweh has ordered to be done. And Aaron dressed the waistbands around his waist, rested him in the robe of ephod on his head. Then from the waistband of the ephod around his waist, put the place
Okay, so to break this down, to see what you got out of it, and whether or not you got the right stuff out of it, okay? So it starts with Moses, right? Aaron and his, and who else is gonna witness this? The whole community. Okay, the whole community. Where does it happen? At the meeting tent. So that's why, I went through all this from the book of Exodus to indicate they had already been establishing how to take care of the tablets in the Ark of the Covenant. They had a place for that, a holy place, okay? And there was a special, tent structure around the Ark of the Covenant. And that structure became known as Tabernacle. Right. Tabernacle. Okay? And outside the structure was a huge veiled area. Okay? And that became this area that they talk about. And the entrance of that veiled area, that became like the sanctuary. Why do they have these layers and so on? Some, who study different religions and so on, in the history of phenomenology,
I love that.
okay, which is, a unique form of anthropology, they would say what they are doing is constructing, with structures, creating sacred space in natural space, okay? And so it's creating the difference between what will be profane and what would be considered sacred space, okay? Phenomenology is studying all different world religions, and functions within those religions, okay? Can be used in a secular sense too, studying from all different cultures and so on. What are some of the commonalities? Okay. Now, as we look at this, so yes, the whole community is there, and they are at the entrance of the tent of meeting. That veil all around, surrounding the tabernacle. Inside the tabernacle would be the Ark of the Covenant. So we've got three different spaces there. This is at the entrance, and that's where the entrance of this tent of meeting will be the place where they bring their offerings and sacrifices. Okay, so as they're beginning to set these people up, that's where it's the public meeting place, really, at the entrance of it. Okay. Later on, when they build the temple, when they settle in Jerusalem and so on, they will have different structures around the temple. They would be called courts, and they would expand out, from them. So it's there that Moses then he does the investiture of Aaron and his sons, and he clothes him, and girts him with the sash, and clothes him with the robe, and verse 7, places the ephod on him, girts him with the embroidered belt of the ephod, fastening it around him. He then sets the breastplate on him, and the Urim and the Thummim in it, and what is that? Dice, something like that, to make decisions. Did you ever know where the expression roll the dice comes from? Okay, it's the Umanim and Thummim. Okay, and he attached a gold plate and sacred diadem takes the anointing oil, huh? Verse 10. And Moses first anoints and consecrates what? The dwelling with all that is in the dwelling. And he sprinkles some of the oil 7 times, perfect number, right? On the altar. He anoints the altar with all its appearances, with the laver and its base, and is thus consecrated. So, I don't know, some of you people may have gone to the consecration of a new priest, a new sanctuary, a new church, and so on, that the priest, the bishop who will come to do the consecrating usually, okay, would pour holy oil, usually chrism, on the altar and rub it in. I recall St. Pius X, when they built their structure in 1980, Bishop Mida came, and he just, he lathered up that altar with the oil and rubbed it all in, and it was crazy, so you could smell it, you know, I think a couple blocks away. But it was, you know, chrism is very aromatic, right? Okay. So here they're using an oil, and they do the altar. And then he pours some of the anointing oil on Aaron's head, thus consecrating him. And then Moses likewise brought forward Aaron's sons and clothed them with tunics and girded them with sashes and put turbans on them as the Lord had commanded him to do. So they had a distinctive garb, huh? Distinctive garb with turbans. I don't know if you ever thought about that, but they wore, you know, special turbans like all the time if they were priests. They were, and that's a part of their consecration. Now, why did they consecrate the altar first and the guys later?
Good, where the good stuff was.
Why did they consecrate the altar first and all its dwellings and utensils, and the priests, the guys, later? Why do you think?
It was where the sacrifice to God was going to be.
Okay, it was where the sacrifices were going to be. And the priests, as ministers, they're going to help, they're set apart from the community by this consecrating oil. Same as the altar is, but here's interesting. So it identifies them with the victims and items that will be sacrificed. It identifies them with the victims and items to be sacrificed, rather than stressing their appointment. Okay? So the priest in the ministry that they're going to do is identified with the sacrifices and the altar of sacrifice that they're going to do it upon. Now, if you stop to think, in our own theology, how does this compare with our own ritual of the Mass? Altar, priest, sacrifice, okay? The items for sacrifice, huh? It happens at the altar, right? We don't consecrate the bread and wine up in the fire line, right? Or over at the side. It's on that altar that has been anointed with oil, huh? And set apart. And so the priest too. And what do we say about, you know, Jesus' sacrifice, his death on the cross? By his death on the cross, he becomes the priest, the lamb of sacrifice. You know, he's all rolled into one, right? And when the priest is at the altar, especially during the consecration, he is presented as the altar rus Christi, an alternate for Christ before you. Okay? You didn't realize that, okay? So that's why by this program here in the book of Leviticus, 1,200 years before Christ or whatever, when the Jewish rituals and rubrics were set up, it is in that order. Okay? As emulated now by Roman Catholics, Anglican Catholics, Orthodox, the same kind of thing, that they are set apart. And so I hope you bring that kind of understanding to this, as you read through. Now, the next section under ceremony of ordination is the ordination sacrifices. And it speaks of, well, there's 8 days. There's 8 days of sacrifices. And each, but just preparing for the sacrifices. These are the instructions and what they are going to do. Verse 14. When he had brought forward a bullock for sin offering, Aaron and his sons laid hands on his head. So the item that is to be used as the sacrifice and the offering, what do the priests do first? At the altar, in Catholic Mass, what does the priest do first? Okay. See, you're making some connections here. And Roy, how come some people, for years they say, I'm going to skip over this. That's old junk. It's irrelevant anymore. I'm trying to make connections for you here.
It is relevant.
Yeah, it is. And it forms like the basis for many of the signs, symbols, and actions that we do today as Roman Catholics in the ritual of the Mass. So laying hands on it. Okay. Thanks be to God, it's an unbloody sacrifice, because then Moses slaughtered it, taking some of the blood with his finger. He put it on the horns of the altar, thus purifying the altar. He also made atonement for the altar by pouring also blood at its base. When he consecrated it, then taking the fat that was over the inner organs as well as the lobe and the liver and the kidneys and fat, Moses burned them on the altar. The bullock, however, with its hide, flesh, and offal, he burned in the fire outside the camp, as the Lord had commanded them. Outside the camp. Why?
It wasn't part of it.
Huh? Huh?
It wasn't part of it.
It wasn't a part of it. Why burn this part outside? Because the Lord commanded it. Huh? These signs, especially the inner organs, you burn that, it stinks. You field dress a deer? Whoever field dress a deer? Or an elk? Or a buffalo? Okay. What do you leave in the woods? Yeah, right, the awful, huh? The guts for the coyotes. The ravens, okay. I'm getting off here. So the act of offering the sacrifice will complete the consecration of the priest. Will complete the consecration of the priest. So what we find here in the rest of chapter 8 is setting up for that. And there's a number of different animals particularly. And each of those animals represents a different offering. Okay? And it goes through it in detail. For instance, a calf. He brings a calf for a sin offering. A ram, that's bigger, as a Holocaust offering. And it goes through, the same steps what to do with the blood and where to splash it and so on. A he-goat is a purification offering or sin offering. A calf or a lamb is a holocaust, burnt offering. Okay? An ox or a ram, a big animal, is called a communion offering or peace offering. And the bigger the animal, the more it would represent the community. Okay? So that would be a peace offering or a communion offering. With grain, if they bring a cereal offering of some kind of grain, it has to be mixed with oil. And then usually with some incense as well. We take. So in chapter 9, just before verse 5, so they brought what Moses had ordered. And when the whole community had come forward and stood before the Lord, Moses said, "This is what the Lord orders you to do, that the glory of the Lord may be revealed to you. Come up to the altar." Moses then told Aaron, and offer your sin offering, your holocaust, in atonement for yourself, for your family, then present the offering of the people in atonement for them, as the Lord has commanded. So the priest, Aaron and his sons and their families, they had to make their first offering was to purify themselves from any sin before the Lord, and then the procedure that Moses taught them to purify themselves so they would be considered holy, clean, to be able to use the other, to minister to the other people, then that set the stage for them to do this for the regular people, the lay people, maybe clans or tribes that would come forward. So the question might be, so why is there an octave of 8 days? Well, this has to be drilled into them, those who are being set aside as priests, okay? Exactly how to do that. Exactly, what parts to cut out of those animal sacrifices. They had to be taught. They didn't have biology. They didn't take biology. They had to open the animal up and point, okay, that's a liver. Those are kidneys. There's 2 of them. Don't leave one in. Okay. But it has to be drilled into them. So the whole process of ordination is going to take like 8 days before they come to their first sacrifice. And the first sacrifices they offer is for themselves and for their families. Aaron and his sons and their families. Okay? Yeah. It's like first mass.
And there's, of course, lots of different things that raise questions, but at chapter 8:23, they
8:23.
take some of the blood and puts it on the tip of the right ear and the thumb of the right hand and the big toe of the right foot, and I'm just curious what the symbolism was there.
I thought so too. I thought that was kind of like odd.
So it's a good question.
Yeah, right.
Without an answer.
This all sounds like something that God wanted Moses to implement once they reached the Holy Land, but all of this is taking place en route. While they're traveling during that 40 years that they're moving, all of these things are happening as they're going at the same time.
And good point, Tom says, this all sounds like it's once they reach the Holy Land, but he's pointing out it seems like it's put in the context of they're still en route, of the Exodus. And I wonder that too, and I kind of look back to see if there were signs of location. All right? Because I always feel it's very important when we study anything, Old Testament or New Testament, to find out not only who's involved, but what is the location.
In time.
Okay, some commentators that I came across seem to indicate that he did this and gave these just before he died. So they're up on, very close to the Holy Land. Okay, but that would presume that Aaron and his sons lived during the whole Exodus experience. So, and then they worship God after that, along the way. Well, if you look from the time that Moses went up the mountain and got the commandments down, and until they get up to, in the book of Deuteronomy, on the shores of the Jordan River, or the Mount Moab, that they had a lot of encounters that seemed to go against what the commandments were. So the bottom line is, we don't know exactly. Okay? It seems like, that it was a process of forming. What's the big goal here? It's forming a motley group of people into a people of God. Okay, that was the main task. That's what the Exodus was about, huh? And so they were on discipline, they were a motley crew, they all weren't related and so on. But that formation, and there's no books for instruction, there's no instruction manual, okay? Okay, so yeah, it ends up here, letting it go, and eventually it becomes their instruction manual and how they did it. But I think of it as a process. I mean, if it only took them 6 months to get from Egypt down to Mount Sinai, and if indeed they traveled, through the Exodus experience for 40 years, that meant there was 39 and a half years. Okay, right? I mean, most people would be retired by then.
Most who started never got there.
Most who started didn't get there. That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I think you need a generation, don't you, to shape people?
Well, that's a generation to shape people. Yes, and that's 40 years was a generation that they thought. Yes.
Weren't there a couple of battles along the way?
Oh, there were all kinds of battles. Yeah, and they sent spies into the Holy Land. At one point, they came back with huge clusters of grapes, and with the story that
They're giants.
they're giants. They build these big walls and these big cities, the highest walls I ever saw in my life. They must be giants. They're remnants of the Anakim, the Nephilim.
Father, can I go back just a little bit? When John the Baptist's father, was that Zechariah,
Yeah.
was the high priest, he went into the Holy of Holies. When we were putting up all these veils and walls and things, was the Holy of Holies established at that time?
You had to go back to that Exodus part,
Okay.
okay, and read beyond what we looked at, this morning. So I believe it was. Yeah.
When were these books written? I mean, do you think that these books were written contemporary with the Exodus experience, or were they done
Yeah.
maybe hundreds of years after that?
Okay, but Bob's question is, when were this book or these rules, especially Leviticus, written? Yeah, for us. Were they written at the time? No, they weren't written at the time. And scholars say this comes from the tradition, the priestly tradition, which comes out of the Babylonian exile era.
So really, hundreds of years later.
Oh yeah,
About-
yeah,
I mean, obviously not
Yeah.
the creation story, but
Right.
the whole Moses story.
yeah. Hundreds of years later. Okay, yeah, Dick.
Was there 2 or 3 areas like this first temple as we're moving toward Jerusalem? Or do you think it all was at the Exodus main tent? This is a movement of people over time,
Yeah,
and instruction how to handle the altar and the sacrifice, I'm leapfrogging ahead even to Christ's time in the temple in Jerusalem. And they have similar services, but were the other synagogues doing the same thing, or some of them doing it, or was it all concentrated in Jerusalem?
In Jerusalem time, well, in the first century, Jesus' time, it was concentrated in Jerusalem. Okay, they celebrated maybe in the synagogues, cereal offerings or so on to be brought. But they, you know, the heads of synagogues weren't priests.
Rabbi?
You know, they weren't even rabbis yet. Rabbis were another. Yeah. Synagogues were formed around Minyan, 12 bar mitzvah men of the community. Minyan, okay?
Well,
And,
it
and,
makes more
and,
sense.
and the circle of elders, the synagogue. Yeah, so Jerusalem was the only place where they actually, in the first century, where they continued to have these sacrifices and so on. And, you know, even in some of the writings of the exilic prophets, you can find it in somewhat of the Psalms. We have no place to offer our sacrifices or first fruits. You find that phrase in those writings because the temple in Jerusalem, the first temple in Jerusalem, had been destroyed by the Babylonians. And that remnant that was taken from Jerusalem to Babylon still knew about the sacrifices and knew what they were supposed to do. But they didn't have a temple or an altar to do it at. There wasn't a provision for that. Okay. So, and this is all revelation. Okay. So, and why did they do everything exactly this way? Well, because that is what the Lord ordered them to do, right? Over and over again. That is why, there's, what, 9 times I said, right? We would find that through these chapters. That is what the Lord ordered them to do. Well, let's just keep that in mind until next week when we go on to the further ordination ceremony. Thank you very much, everyone.